Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Dave Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my Week 1 matchups for the 2021 fantasy football season. On today's episode, we're just talking about matchups. Plain and simple, all 15 remaining games in Week 1 of the 2021 fantasy football season, giving you guys some extra perspective as to what I've kind of been implying throughout the episodes during the week. Again, with the running back, wide receiver, tight end, and quarterback episodes, I talked about matchups to an extent, but I wanted to go ahead and take a deeper dive, giving you guys a little bit more perspective as to the players who really have advantageous matchups and that should be starting in your lineups this upcoming week. Outside of that, there will be players that I'm going to be mentioning at an individual team basis as I go through the entire slate of games for this upcoming weekend. And there may be players that I'm not so excited about, and I'll explain to you why, and I'll give you the statistics and the perspective to perhaps maybe save you from the pain of playing Ezekiel Elliott on a Thursday night, because we knew that was going to happen. But either way, before we begin, I want to just make a note. This is a first Saturday episode that I've done in a while. Typically, I don't do Saturday episodes, but if in fact this is something that many of you guys enjoy and this is content you guys want to continue to see, then of course click that like button down below, and of course comment down below and let me know what you guys want on Saturday afternoons. I'm open to making a lot of different content, and this is something that I'm probably going to rotate in, because going into Week 1 of the 2021 fantasy football season, we're coming off of a year in which it was the highest scoring NFL season in the history of the game. And if in fact we're going to see something else different with so many variables changing every single year, whether it is free agency, injuries, the NFL draft, of course, we're trying to stay up to date with the National Football League, and we're trying to get an upper hand on our leagues going into the 2021 fantasy football season so we can, of course, start strong and capture a victory here in Week 1. Now, before we begin, of course, I want to thank you guys for supporting the channel and continuing to come out every day with your viewership, liking, commenting, sharing, and of course, if you have not yet already, subscribing to the channel. We are very close to our goal of 50,000 subscribers, so if you have not yet already, we're making fantasy football content for the entirety of the 2021 season. So again, subscribe, click that bell notification button. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, I will be live streaming here on the channel. Kickoff with Kirchhoff, answering your guys' questions and getting your lineup set before Week 1. Now, the final thing I want to cover before we begin getting into individual matchups, regardless of position, I do want to mention the stats that are directly to the left of me, the 2020 rushing stats allowed. So, as you can see on screen, we have a rank 1 through 32, which is, of course, all 32 teams in the National Football League, and how many statistics and or fantasy points they were giving up to opposing running backs on a weekly basis on average in a half-point PPR scoring format last season in rushing statistics alone. This does not include anything in the receiving game. So as you can see, the Houston Texans, Jacksonville Jaguars, Detroit Lions, Dallas Cowboys, Minnesota Vikings were giving up the most points to opposing running backs last season on the ground. In fact, we're giving up almost 20 fantasy points per week amongst those top 5 teams. But yeah, the Houston Texans were by far, in a way, the greatest matchup a running back could have on the ground. Luckily for James Robinson, he's going to go ahead and tear them apart. But we'll talk about that matchup when we get into it. But I wanted to go ahead and show you guys these statistics because in comparison to the tight end and wide receiver positions, of course, the numbers that I've already shown you earlier in the week pretty much cover everything. Receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns. Nothing else needs to be included. And the quarterback position was all encompassing as well. But the running back position can be divided into 2 different parts because, like I've talked about this offseason already, when it comes to teams and targeting the running back position, they don't want to target running backs regardless of what defense they play, because the influence in targeting their respective running backs is more of a schematic strategy rather than it is going after a specific defense because they are giving up a lot of receptions or their linebackers can't cover. Yes, in specific circumstances, you can go ahead and take advantage of that. But typically when I've gone ahead and looked at the statistics over the last couple of years, the running back position benefits mainly because of the scheme and the team wanting to throw the ball to their respective running backs rather than the matchup on hand. But you can go ahead and check out my running backs strength of schedule video that I posted last month and get a little bit more perspective regarding that. Okay, let's get into this, shall we? I want to start talking about the games that are going to start our weekend, of course, Sunday morning, beginning with the Philadelphia Eagles playing against the Atlanta Falcons. Of course, just want to go over it really quickly. The Philadelphia Eagles, earlier this morning, they signed a 4-year deal to their left tackle, Jordan Mailata. As of the last month or so, I was under the impression that Andre Dillard was going to be playing left tackle for this team, but that is not going to be the case. He's still dealing with injuries, and Mailata, of course, is, as of right now, one of the highest paid left tackles in the National Football League after this morning's deal, and he's gone and earned it. respectively. So either way, this offensive line is ready to go. And when they play against the Atlanta Falcons, the question is, are they going to be able to run the ball against them? How is Miles Sanders going to produce? When we look at the numbers immediately to the left of me, they don't give up a lot of statistics on the ground to opposing running backs. I found that they were only giving about 10 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. And to be honest, if one touchdown's there, that's only about 40 yards. And that's typically where they were giving up to opposing running backs last year, because not once did the Atlanta Falcons last year give up a single 100-yard rusher. But I think that's going to change this week. I think there is going to be a 100-yard rusher for the Philadelphia Eagles, and it's not going to be Miles Sanders. I think Jalen Hurts is going to run all over this defense. A lot of people may be thinking, Jalen Hurts is going to throw the ball. He's going to air it out. He's going to show everybody that he can pass the ball. I honestly think that he is going to torch them with his legs. He's going to be able to get himself a lot of yardage on the ground, because whether it is design plays or scrambles, he's going to show the league that, it's going to be tough to play against the Philadelphia Eagles every single week, considering the kind of weapons they have, especially with the mobility at the quarterback position. So that's my first little bold prediction there. Though I do think that Miles Sanders is going to play well, I think that his contribution in the passing game being taken away by Boston Scott's presence and Kenneth Gainwell does hurt him overall. But ultimately, I think in terms of the Philadelphia Eagles playing against the Atlanta Falcons defense, the best matchup overall is Jalen Hurts. He has a bunch of weapons to his disposal, and though they are not in the greatest overall matchups individually, I think he himself is going to benefit the most from this matchup and try to will his team to a victory. Now, outside of that, of course, we have the Atlanta Falcons. I think on that side of the ball, the best matchup are the wide receivers. I talked about Russell Gage yesterday and Calvin Ridley earlier this week. Those two guys have the best matchups by far, and it's not even close. There could be an argument for, of course, the tight end position, Kyle Pitts, and whether or not he's going to dominate, but it depends how they're going to use him. If they're going to line him out wide, then certainly he'll have himself a pretty good week. But if they're going to use him as an inline tight end and he's going to be covered by linebackers, it is going to be a little bit more difficult for him this week to get all the opportunities that we anticipate. The idea of him getting 10 plus targets playing an inline tight end position is going to be far more difficult than it is whether he's going to be playing out wide. But for sure, Jalen Hurts and the wide receivers for the Atlanta Falcons have the best matchups in that specific contest this upcoming week. If we move on to the next game, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers playing against the Buffalo Bills. Now, as you can see to the left of me, another statistic, the Buffalo Bills gave up the 11th most points to opposing running backs on the ground. I'm telling you guys, regardless of the fact that the Pittsburgh Steelers are most likely going to have two rookie offensive linemen, this linebacking core and this upfront seven for the Buffalo Bills is not great. Specifically, Milano, Klein, and Edmonds, they cannot stop the run. They have not been able to do so. If you are a Bills fan, you know that this is the case, and this is where your team struggles the most. It is stopping the run, because your coverage, your secondary is one of the best in the league, and that's certainly going to potentially hold up Ben Roethlisberger and them extending plays through the air. I honestly think Najee Harris is in the best position in terms of this entire team. Specifically, the stat that I wanted to mention, the last time these two teams played in 2020, the Pittsburgh Steelers were only averaging 2.76 yards per carry between their three running backs in the attempts that they had. I think that's going to be far more different. I think they'll maybe even double that thing up this upcoming week, get Najee Harris to a fantastic start of his NFL career. Now, on the other side of the ball, of course, we have the Buffalo Bills. And similarly, the Pittsburgh Steelers, they have a fantastic defense, and you're not going to want to run the ball against them. You just can't, especially with them getting TJ Watt back. So the running back positions for the Buffalo Bills, that's off the table. You have to then invest in the wide receiver position, and whether that's going to go to the Stephon Diggs, of course, that's just an automatic. He torched them last year. Outside of Stephon Diggs, over the last couple of years, of course, we've seen Cole Beasley command the next most targets in this offense, but I think Gabriel Davis maybe takes that next step this upcoming week and potentially shows that, yes, Emmanuel Sanders is in this offense, but he's not going to be utilized as much. We move on to the next matchup. We have the Minnesota Vikings versus the Cincinnati Bengals. The thing that I wanted to mention first and foremost is that Cook, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen are all must-starts this week. I honestly think that there's a potential in which, based on the matchup itself, I know, the Cincinnati Bengals, they have, good pass rushers here and there. They've got, pretty good safeties with Bates, the third over there. They've got decent players every now and then. But their secondary as a whole is not going to be able to handle Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen. That combo is going to torch them. And the Cincinnati Bengals are one of the worst defenses in terms of stopping the run, as you can see on the screen to the left of me. They've been giving up the 7th most points to opposing running backs on the ground, about 16.63 fantasy points per game just from rushing statistics alone. Of course, when Dalvin Cook goes for 100 yards and a touchdown, that's pretty much going to encompass that, and it will have the receiving yards as the extra bonus. So, of course, you're starting all three of those guys. But on the other side of the ball, when we talk about the Cincinnati Bengals, I think the biggest boost of potential, in my opinion, goes to Tyler Boyd. I think Tyler Boyd might even be a better play than Jamar Chase this upcoming week. And though that may be an unpopular opinion, when I look at what Tyler Boyd was capable of doing against defenses when Joe Burrow was in the offense last year, from weeks 1 through 11, the 10 games that they played together, Tyler Boyd averaged 16.24 fantasy points per game in a full PPR scoring format. This upcoming week, the slot corner for the Minnesota Vikings is Mackenzie Alexander. He's not one of the better ones in the National Football League. He's, I guess, average, if you would put it at that. And I think Tyler Boyd, of course, is going to see a lot of targets because this team is most likely going to pass the ball for the entirety of the game in order to keep up with what the Minnesota Vikings are going to be providing. In terms of what the implied total of this game is, it's relatively high, and I think there's a potential in which this is a shootout. Move on to the next contest, of course. We have the San Francisco 49ers and the Detroit Lions, and there's a reason why Raheem Mostert was today's thumbnail, is because I got to talk about what exactly Raheem Mostert is going to be able to do against this defense. I honestly think he's going to punish them. When we look at what the San Francisco 49ers have up front, they've gone ahead and they've improved the center position, bringing in Alex Mack. They bring in Tomlinson as a left guard. To be honest, the left side of this offensive line, Trent Williams and Tomlinson, might be the best left side of an offensive line in the National Football League. They certainly have the best right and left tackle combo in terms of run blockers. They have two of the highest, if not the highest graded overall run blockers in the National Football League, according to Pro Football Focus, with Trent Williams and McGlinchey. Now, when we look at what Raheem Mostert has been able to do in his career, of course, I've mentioned it before, the guy's averaged over 5 yards per carry since being, the starting running back of the San Francisco 49ers team, and has continued to produce on a consistent level. And once he took the job in Week 12 of the 2019 season, when they were on their Super Bowl run, he really dominated. I mean, he had, 6 or 7 consecutive games of a rushing touchdown. Going into the NFL playoffs, of course, he had that 250-yard rushing game against the Green Bay Packers defense, dominating against them. But even going into the 2020 season, the 4 games that he played prior to his severe high ankle sprain that knocked him out of Week 6's contest, I mean, the 4 games prior, the statistics he was putting up, 23.1 points, 17.7, 13.4, and an 8.6. Obviously, the 8.6 game he left midway through against the Los Angeles Rams with that ankle injury. When we looked at since him being the starting running back of the San Francisco 49ers in 2019, Week 12, throughout the regular season, in a half PPR scoring format, the guy's averaged 16.38 fantasy points per game in the last 10 games that he's played for them. Honestly, I think Raheem Mostert is a huge potential of having maybe even a top 5 fantasy week this week. If he's in your roster, he has to start. I know that there's a lot of options, but you'll see tomorrow when we do our live stream kickoff with Kirchhoff, my updated rankings will be there. He is going to be relatively high in comparison to all these other running backs, but we're not going to just leave it at that in terms of the 49ers. I think Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel are both going to ball out as well. When we look at the secondary of the Detroit Lions with Jeff Okudah and, of course, Amani Oruwariye, I think that's how you pronounce it. These are two of the worst coverage cornerbacks in the National Football League. Based on their grades last year, they have not been able to cover. They've given up a lot of yardage, a lot of receptions and touchdowns to opposing wide receivers. I think the entire 49ers offense is a must play. Obviously, you don't have to play Jimmy Garoppolo because you just, you don't have to play him. There are better options. But I think Raheem Mostert, Kittle, of course, these two wide receivers, Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk, have to be started. And maybe even Trey Sermon if you're in a deeper league. Now, on the other side with the Detroit Lions, don't want to touch anybody. Yes, you'll play Swift because you can maybe get some receptions, and in a full PPR, if he catches the ball 8 times, you're in a really good spot. But outside of that, TJ Hawkinson, still sketchy. You have to play him, right? But I don't want to have to, deal with anybody in this matchup. You just got to hope that the garbage time is there for Jared Goff, and he's going to be able to find some pretty productive plays here and there that give these guys their ultimate value. All right, we move on to the next matchup, Seattle Seahawks versus the Indianapolis Colts. Okay, so this is going to be, in my opinion, a higher scoring game, despite everyone kind of pointing to the fact that these are really good defenses. I'm honestly expecting Russell Wilson to come out and light it up. And if and when he does, the Colts are going to have to pass the ball. And Carson Wentz, he's just going to have to either figure it out or be the Carson Wentz of last year. But the thing that I wanted to mention between these two teams, obviously with the Seattle Seahawks, you're starting everyone there. Carson, Russell Wilson, DK Metcalf, and Tyler Lockett. Maybe Gerald Everett. But again, that is a tougher matchup. The opposite side of this matchup for the Indianapolis Colts, of course, if you're a Jonathan Taylor manager, you're firing him up. But outside of that, are we playing Pittman? Are we playing Mo Alley Cox, Jack Doyle, Nyheim Hines? I don't know. But I think if you want to keep an eye on one player that maybe if in fact can have himself a good week here. Could be a potential pickup for week 2 of the 2021 fantasy football season. It's Paris Campbell. Paris Campbell is going to be playing the slot wide receiver position. And when we look at what he was capable of doing last season, we know that this offense wants to utilize him. And I certainly think that Carson Wentz could be looking in his direction a lot this upcoming week, mainly because he plays against Marquise Blair. Marquise Blair, of course, had a season-ending injury last year, didn't play at all, and is coming back to be the slot cornerback of the Seattle Seahawks defense. I honestly think that Paris Campbell can torch him. These are both players coming off of injuries from last year, but Paris Campbell is a special wide receiver, and if he could stay healthy, he could dominate and potentially have himself, the most receptions on this team this upcoming week. Just keep an eye on that. All right, the next matchup is Arizona versus Tennessee. I'm starting everyone, literally everyone. Henry, Tannehill, A.J. Brown, Julio. Get them in there. Doesn't matter. The matchup's just free. And then on the other side, Kyler, Edmonds, maybe even A.J. Green, but for sure, DeAndre Hopkins. Based on what we've seen out of Vegas, this is probably going to score more than 50 points between both teams combined. So if we're going to get a 24 to 28 matchup, a 30 to 35 game, a lot of touchdowns are going to be scored. So I want to get every potential piece of this game that I can. I know a lot of people are talking about Rondale Moore and his potential of filling in this slot role in comparison to Christian Kirk. I don't mind picking him up and leaving him on my bench, but starting him in week 1 is definitely a sketchy one, especially with rookie wide receivers. All right, we move on to the next matchup. We have the New York Jets versus the Carolina Panthers. I've talked about a couple of these guys already, but the only pieces that outside of Christian McCaffrey, DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, Corey Davis that I'm interested in, don't really look like guys that I can start this week. I 100% cannot start either of these quarterbacks. I'm not looking at either team's tight ends, so those are just immediately eliminated. Tevin Coleman's mainly a guy that I would play in a deeper league, but I just kind of want to wait and see what he ends up producing. Now, the only guy that I'm willing to go and pick up and just throw on my bench other than Terrace Marshall that we talked about yesterday in the Hidden Gems video is Elijah Moore. With Jamison Crowder out this week, I think Elijah Moore filling in the slot position could have a breakout game here and pretty much solidify himself a starting role in this offense. Okay, next we have the Los Angeles Chargers against the Washington football team. McLaurin, Allen, maybe these quarterbacks. I mean, Logan Thomas is okay. The matchup's going to be tougher with Derwin James back. I still think that there's a potential where Darnold Parham and or Jared Cook are huge parts of this offense, but we're just going to have to wait and see how Joe Lombardi is going to kind of scheme it up as their offensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Chargers. But Herbert, Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler is a very sketchy play. We're going to keep our eye on how he is feeling, whether or not he's going to even play and suit up this upcoming week. But on the other side of the ball, Logan Thomas, McLaurin, keep an eye on Adam Thielen. Of course, with Curtis Samuel going to the injured reserve, we could see another receiving option present itself. Maybe they'll get J.D. McKissick in the slot position, but I think Adam Thielen is most likely going to rule that position as of the next coming weeks. The Jacksonville Jaguars matchup playing against the Houston Texans. As you can see to the left of me, in terms of rushing statistics, they've given up the most points to opposing running backs as of last season. So James Robinson's an automatic play. Now, it's a question between do I want to play David Johnson or Phillip Lindsay? Because a lot of people looked at how many snaps Phillip Lindsay was getting in the preseason. He wasn't very effective with them, but playing against the Jacksonville Jaguars can be free fantasy points up for grabs. And maybe if, in fact, Phillip Lindsay is going to take this role and run away with it, we could end up seeing him having some value there. But to be honest, I think it's far too sketchy of a play to go and grab Phillip Lindsay and throw him in your lineup in hopes that he's going to score a touchdown or even been given enough opportunity to get on the field and get him enough fantasy points on the ground, because through the air it's not going to happen. So to be honest, it's just too sketchy for my blood. If you are in a deeper league, you can go ahead and try to ride it out there because of how good of a matchup it is. But I just want to play fantasy prospects from the Jacksonville Jaguars side, whether it is J-Rob, of course, Laviska Shenault, Marvin Jones, DJ Chark. I'm all in over there, Trevor Lawrence. On the other side, I don't know what Tyrod Taylor's offense is going to look like, and nor do I believe it's going to be functional enough to get them to the next level and getting a lot of fantasy value for all the other parts that are involved there, whether it is Brandon Cooks, Nico Collins, Chris Conley, Jordan Akins, again. All right, Miami Dolphins versus the New England Patriots. I mean, it's a matter of really the New England Patriots tight ends and running backs dominating this game because, to be honest, the linebackers for the Miami Dolphins, they can't cover. Their safeties are, average. but they also can't stop the run. So it's just going to be running double tight end sets with Hunter Henry and, of course, Jonnu Smith, and then running the ball with Damian Harris. I think the best overall scenario for a wide receiver for the New England Patriots succeeding is most likely Jacoby Myers, but he cannot have Xavier Howard on him. And if, in fact, he's going to pull Xavier Howard's overall coverage, then Nelson Aguilar is going to benefit on the other side of the field, with Mac Jones obviously dumping him off the ball. In terms of the Miami Dolphins side, I'm not interested in playing Devontae Parker playing against J.C. Jackson. I don't like Waddle's overall matchup against the Patriots slot corner. It's kind of sketchy. They're going to be missing their left tackle. Their starting left tackle's out. So Tua is going to be a little bit under pressure in terms of his front side. Myles Gaskin running the ball with, a pretty janky offensive line, hopefully can find some overall productivity there. But as a whole, at this moment in time, I'm just not too excited about the Miami Dolphins prospects. Hopefully they can change my mind. We have the Cleveland Browns taking on the Kansas City Chiefs. Again, another game in which their implied total based on Vegas and what they've put up is over 50 points. So I'm probably starting everyone. So Jarvis probably will somehow, somewhat get into some of my lineups. OBJ I want to play. Hooper I want to play in some games. Hunt, and of course, Nick Chubb is an automatic. On the other side, Clyde Edwards, Travis Kelce, Mahomes, Tyreek Hill. Those guys are obviously going to play, regardless of what I tell you. But I do want to play some of those Cleveland Browns. I honestly think this is going to be a higher scoring contest. Denver Broncos versus the New York Giants. I think Kenny Golladay playing against Kyle Fuller, in my opinion, based on what he's done against them in his past 4 games, again, has always either scored a touchdown, surpassed 100 receiving yards, or at least 80 receiving yards against Kyle Fuller. So there's a lot of success there in the past couple games against him when he used to play for the Chicago Bears. On the other side, we have Sutton and or Jerry Jeudy. Whoever gets James Bradbury's coverage is going to be in trouble. But as of right now, I'm not too worried about them. I think they can both be decent wide receiver 3 plays, considering their usage in this offense and the amount of opportunity they're going to get from Teddy Bridgewater. The thing that I want to mention is, of course, as you can see to the left of me, the Denver Broncos do give up a lot of points on the ground. That does help the cause of potentially starting a Saquon Barkley if, in fact, you are bold enough to do so. Maybe if you have a Raheem Mostert or James Robinson and you could play them instead, then you go for it. Otherwise, the Denver Broncos, they still do get Devon Miller back. Bradley Chubb is still there. They've got a pretty decent run-stopping defense. They can certainly get after it in that regard. The next matchup, Green Bay Packers playing against the New Orleans Saints. If you have a defense as it currently stands and you're not too comfortable playing your Buffalo defense versus Pittsburgh or Pittsburgh against Buffalo, I would suggest you go drop somebody else off your bench and you go pick up Green Bay's defense. You play them this week against Jameis Winston, who, of course, is probably going to turn over the ball eventually. And you get to play the matchup next week against the Detroit Lions. That's a 2-for-1, and you can get a pretty good defense in back-to-back weeks to help you out. Of course, you're starting Rodgers, Adams, you're playing Aaron Jones. But that's about it there. Robert Tonyan, if in fact you don't have a better tight end, then yeah, let's run him out there. I think he's in my top 10 this week, so we're great. As for the other side, Marquez Callaway is the only other question mark because we're, of course, playing Alvin Kamara, and that's the only commodity that we want to touch there. Callaway is tough because if he gets the coverage of Jair Alexander, who is a top 5 cornerback in the National Football League, then he's going to be in trouble. But if we can get Jair Alexander to cover someone else, then you're fine. But, Traquan Smith going out with an injury, I think it makes it even more difficult because that coverage team only really has to take care of Marquez Callaway and Alvin Kamara, and they could pretty much shut down the Saints offense as a whole. Chicago Bears versus the Rams. I have the Rams by a mile. Honestly, I think the Rams are going to score a bunch of points. Cooper Kupp might even have a top 10, top 7 overall fantasy week because the coverage in terms of the slot corner on the Chicago Bears is awful. Their entire secondary is really bad. I mean, they really have gone downhill over the last couple of years, not signing back free agents, not really investing in there in terms of their draft picks and finding immediate starters that can at least provide a lot of protection in the secondary. Obviously, their pass rush has helped year over year to kind of mitigate the fact that their secondary isn't great. But I think this upcoming week with Matthew Stafford and his experience against the Bears, he's going to definitely be able to torch him. So, of course, we're starting our Rams. On the other side of the ball, if you have to play Allen Robinson, then go for it. Outside of that, I don't want to touch anybody else. Montgomery's even a sketchy play. Last but definitely not least, we have the Monday night game against the Las Vegas Raiders in Las Vegas playing against the Baltimore Ravens. We know the Baltimore Ravens backfield is in shambles. we will play Tyson Williams 100% because he's going to be the only guy outside of Lamar that's actually going to be consistently running the ball there. And you're going to probably find a lot of success considering how many yards and or touchdowns and fantasy points as a whole the Las Vegas Raiders have given the running backs. In fact, the 6th most as of last season, 17 per game to opposing running backs. Obviously, that doesn't even count against quarterbacks. So I think there's going to be a little bit of a mixture between Lamar and him, definitely taking their reps in terms of running the ball. But Tyson Williams should be successful in that. Marquise Brown, of course. I expect Lamar to be an automatic play. And Mark Andrews should be at an even more expanded role based on the fact that Nick Boyle is now on the injured reserve. Their second string tight end, who sometimes takes targets away from him, is gone. Mark Andrews should be on the field even more this upcoming season than in years past. The Las Vegas Raiders, Darren Waller. That is all. Josh Jacobs in a tough matchup. They're going to pass a lot in order to keep up with the Ravens. But with that being said, it really depends between Bryan Edwards and Henry Ruggs who is getting the coverage of Marlon Humphries. Whoever does, I can just go ahead and eliminate them from the game, and the other one is going to have a better contest. So if it is Ruggs pulling the coverage of Marlon Humphries, then we expect Bryan Edwards to have a pretty big game and vice versa. So we'll just have to keep an eye on that. It is in Vegas. Last year, early in the season, the Vegas Raiders were able to beat the New Orleans Saints at home. There is a potential where they could keep it close with the Baltimore Ravens. But even if they do, that even helps guys like Tyson Williams overall and his overall potential and productivity this week. All right, those are the 15 remaining matchups for this upcoming week. Again, there's a lot of guys that you have to keep your eye on, whether it is Paris Campbell, Elijah Moore, Terrace Marshall, Tony Jones Jr. I mean, there are so many low-key players that maybe you want to go after, even A.J. Green, Rondell Moore. There's so many players that we could potentially go after, but it's week 1, it's early. We don't want to go ahead and drop our entire bench. We just kind of want to play it safe, see how everything is going to transpire this upcoming week, because if, in fact, we get ourselves into a situation where, these guys are absolutely terrible, they're not going to produce well, or it's going to take them a couple weeks to get acclimated to the league and or their respective offenses, then, you don't want to jump too far into it. But remember, it is week 1. You don't want to tilt. You don't want to automatically see one bad performance and trade a player. Just got to play it patiently, okay? It's a marathon, people, marathon. Anyway, thank you everybody for watching. Click the like button down below. Comment down below. Let me know what you guys think about this kind of episode throughout the week. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, I will be live streaming here on the channel, answering all questions and making sure you guys are ready for week 1 of the 2021 fantasy football season. I will have my updated rankings between the top 36 running backs, wide receivers, and the top 16 quarterbacks and tight ends, and my predictions for week 1. I did predict that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers would win, but I wouldn't have ever thought it would have been that close of a game ever. But it's the NFL. You never know year to year. All right, guys. Thank you. And until tomorrow, I'll see you guys. Peace.